the next session. So we've heard the perspectives from the agency, from a content creator, from an economist, and now we're going to cover the full sweep, and we are going to have our first brand of the day on stage. So please welcome to the stage Hoyne, the CMO for Europe Bacardi, and he will be interviewed on stage by M&M Global's editor, Alex Brownsell. Welcome to the stage, gentlemen.
Let's get comfy. Right. Thank you to you who have chosen Caesar over Julius. I think we're Caesar, aren't we? Shane, thank you for your time, and thanks for flying into Rome. The first thing I'm going to ask is, you made the move, I think, about 6 months ago to join Bacardi. Was it simply a case of whiskey over rum, or were there other motivations?
Well, for those of you who have met Mike Dolan, our CEO, you know that you have no choice when he asks you these things. But for me, it was a chance to, I've worked in the alcohol industry for 20 years. I've worked with great companies such as Heineken and William Grant's. But joining Bacardi was a chance to truly change a company, and a company that was desperately looking to change how it operated, especially from a marketing perspective. When I joined, the company talked about its brands as categories, and I really struggled with that in terms of brands are brands, and a wonderful portfolio, brands like Grey Goose and Martini and Bacardi and Bombay Sapphire and Doers, a wonderful portfolio of brands that had probably lagged in terms of what was expected of great brands in a marketing capacity over the last number of years. And as a result of that, performance wasn't probably where it should be. So coming in with a clear mandate to really change what marketing meant in the company, but also to make the changes required, whether it was structural changes, investment changes, but also agency strategy as well, was a really an opportunity that I couldn't turn down.
Yeah, it's been a big 12 months, I think, and you've been there 6 months, and there's been changes to the agency situation. There's been changes to the way that you operate your marketing. How are things going so far?
Going well. We're currently working with our partners to really kind of define the future. We've made some huge progress, and I know there's been some press about this, but in my mind, the better we can focus our agencies, the better we can welcome new partners, and I think that's really important. Is that, and we'll talk about that more, I think, in a minute. But we had hundreds of agencies doing the same thing, right? And that doesn't allow you to get great work out the door. So for me, it's all about the work, and what are the things we got to do to make sure that we're doing the best work possible to support these great brands. So focusing our disciplines, working with dedicated media companies, creative companies, PR agencies, allows us more time to bring in better partners, allows us more time to, this is something I really believe in, is that, and it's actually interesting from some of the conversations this morning, is that the clients have kind of positioned themselves at the bottom of the value tree in this creative process. And we do that because we're busy and because we're running businesses, but also because it's convenient sometimes not to push yourself up, because then you get more accountability for the creative process and for the output. And my real goal is in Bacardi Company is to move us as a client up the value tree, to have more conversations with partners, to really understand how we create unique things together to move the needle, and not just fall into the same old routines that brands can fall into if they don't have a strong voice.
And we'll come back to some of those topics and expand on those later, but I think probably we should start with what I imagine you started with, which is the consumer. This festival's been going for 10 years, and the consumer has changed a lot, let alone the speakers and the festival itself. And when you approached the role and you looked at how brands, like the brands that Bacardi owns, engage with consumers, what was your thinking? How did things maybe need to change a little bit?
Well, first of all, we take a 10, 15, 20-year view, depending on the brand, on where we see things going, and that's around geographic expansion. That's around the cultural shifts that have kind of that have changed, and informed how consumers react, but also about what kind of brands we want to build as well. So I spent quite a bit of time in this role, but also in previous roles in Asia, in Africa, in South America, looking at what's happening with consumers there, and we have to look at it in chunks because there is no one definition anymore. But I do think in general. I think with Alistair covered off this morning in the Economist overview about these massive urbanization, these massive hubs, the pressure and how this is informing how consumers are making their choices. And as brands that are present and want to be present more in those areas, that's a huge factor for us. But also, if you look at Europe, the effects of the economic recession over the last number of years has really changed what consumers want from brands. They want a lot more. It's no longer a product deliverable; it's a complete integrated brand deliverable. And they want brands to really transcend the product area and really add value to their lives. And we look at brands like Bacardi or Grey Goose, and we've taken a different approach, and we look at what we call, well, depending on who you speak to in our company, it's either called a vertical or a horizontal. I'm not really quite sure what it's called. You can argue it both ways. But we're looking at really kind of connecting through passion platforms. So what's really important to our consumers, whether it's fashion, whether it's music. For Martini, it's motor racing. We have a 50-year legacy in motor racing. And really bringing those forward to consumers, using the matrices of our media partners, our creative partners, to engage them on relevant platforms where they can say immediate relevance to their lives versus a traditional model of push communication. And we're on a journey of trying to move our brands into that direction, and it's working really well for us at the moment. And we're seeing the starts of really interesting things. But the consumer's changing, and I thought it was really interesting that a 10-year party becomes a 3-year party. I think it's going to become like a half-life. It's going to become a 2-year party. Yeah. And for us in Bacardi, we love a party. So we're going to have a party probably every 6 months on the consumer, because it is changing that quick. And as our business model changes, as we push more, we're doing a lot of work in India at the moment. As we push into India, as we try and consolidate our business in Korea, Japan, and China, we are learning every day. And one of the main reasons I came here as well is to kind of really get a broader perspective on that, because we need the partners on the ground who can help us understand truly how we're going to connect with our consumers, not just through media or creative, but as a business as well. And so that it's at the front of my mind, and it's the way that we've restructured the marketing team in Bacardi. It's at the front of everybody's mind who works on marketing at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, maybe the door is closed at the moment for other agencies for you to work. You've talked about how the new model is working well for you. But obviously, you've said you're open to new partnerships, you're open to other ways of connecting. How can media help Bacardi's brands kind of become part of consumer lifestyles?
Yeah, it's funny, we look at, I think Bernardo's in the room, so I've got to be careful what I say about our media partners. Hi, Bernardo, if you're there. I do think it's important, as we look at the consumer, they don't really use the term media that much anymore. You're either relevant in their world or you're not relevant in their world, right? And you either turn up in a way that they want to engage with you or you don't get engaged with. So for me, media is a very expansive terminology. And we have a great partner that we're really happy with that's helping us get just better diligence, better structure, better governance around how we go to market. But within that, we're open for business. I mean, we are really welcoming, and OMD are working really hard with us on this. People who can help us get our brands in front of consumers in the right way. And we talk about partners. We talk about we love ideas. We love new ideas. We love ideas that scare us a little bit. And once we get now that we've got ourselves structured, we've got ourselves focused, we've got ourselves organized, we have more time to think about how we want to do that. And we went to the CES in Vegas recently, and we met with a whole host of potential people who can work, with OMD and us together to help us really drive forward on getting out of the media conversation per se, but getting into a really deep engagement conversation with consumers.
Mm-hmm. What's your scope for experimentation? One of the kind of catchphrases at the moment is, be prepared or even embrace failure. How does that sit with you?
Well, I don't like failure, but you have to take calculated risks on these things. And we work in a highly regulated industry for all the right reasons, and of course, risks that word can sometimes go against the frame of that. But for me, risks are about the biggest risk for me is treating our brand like a commodity, and treating our brand like everybody else treats their brand, and treating our consumers like they're just one group of people who think exactly the way that our data tells us they should think. And so we got to get outside of that. So we got to be more expressive. We got to try new things in our brands. We got to be brave enough to think about consumer on different metrics than traditionally alcohol brands have thought about them. And we have a portfolio that spans depending on where you are in the world, but the standard to the luxury. If you look at our whiskey portfolio already within whiskies goes from standard right up to $50,000 a bottle whiskey. And with Grey Goose, we're already in the luxury segment in the minds of consumers. That you have to be brave and take risks in those areas, and that often means choices we make on how we communicate through media. It's now becoming much more about how we have a singular idea that transcends creative media and partners, and is one idea, and it's not an idea that traditionally came from the ad to the media plan to what's left. We're really looking at ideas in a holistic sense, and if an idea can't, if we can't credibly see a future where an idea can really, have partners kind of really want to work with us, excite the media agency, deliver content that we all aspire to. The work that Steve makes, it's absolutely fantastic. But if it can't evoke that level of emotion, then we're not taking enough risks in what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that obviously you've got brands that range from mainstream to kind of luxury. Do you have to take a different approach with those types of brands, especially storytelling, or actually the ideas, the core ideas behind it?
Yeah, absolutely. And the more luxury you go, the more demanding the storytelling aspect of the brand is. So when we look at brands like, say, Bombay Sapphire or Grey Goose, very, very well-known brands that are perceived to be in the premium luxury end of their categories, it's much more demanding that we have great stories to tell. And that doesn't mean just making another big ad, which sometimes it does, but not always. But putting ourselves into culture in a really relevant way, that we're not branding culture, but we're actually credibly creating something that people can respect us for. Mm-hmm. And that's where the rules have started to really step up. We have one of the best kept secrets in our business is we have these absolutely phenomenal brand homes that are stunning locations where the brands were either invented or are currently made, and no one knows about them. And these are all part of, we got to bring this to life, find ways to really, at the luxury end of our business, get people to truly understand our heritage, our provenance, our quality, in a way that you can't do through traditional media. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think, again, I use partners a lot, but that's where we need different ideas, different ways to bring our brands to life. Otherwise, we're just going to be the same as other companies, and other companies have more money than we have. So if it comes down to a dollar for dollar investment, we're never going to win that game. And actually, I'm not interested in being in that game either.
I mean, you mentioned traditional media, big ads. Lots of folks here from the so-called traditional media kind of owner side, and lots of folks here from the digital and the newer side. And would you erring in one direction or the other? Is it not about that?
It's easy to say it's not about that when you're sitting up on a stage. It is about that to a degree. But we make big ads, right? But we don't make big ads to make big ads. We make big ads as part of an idea that allows us to play more credibly in digital world, right? I don't like the buzz terms of digital first, but the fact of the matter is, an idea, it's all about the idea. And if it's a great idea, it will live through different mediums. And we are really, really embracing. And you know what, as a company, and I'll say this, Bacardi as a company over the last couple of years probably under-indexed in the industry in terms of our adapting into the digital world. One of the big changes we made, conscious changes we made, with the help of our media agency, was to really move the paradigm. And we are disproportionately investing. I won't give you the number, but we're disproportionately investing in digital world. And I would argue we're probably investing as a proportion of our media budget more than the industry is. And that's a shift that we've made in 1 year. Mm-hmm. So we're all in for it. We think that's the way that we're going to bring our brands to life in a way that's not going to be just a direct dollar for dollar comparison with the bigger companies, but also it's going to meet our needs, which is to truly connect with meaningful ideas that can flow through passion verticals or horizontals, whatever we call them, and that can attract people who want to work with us. And call that digital or traditional, I don't really know. We use the term, we use a commonly used term of our engagement plans, and that they will be what they will be depending on each brand. And when you get into the standard segment, it is traditional plays a bigger role. When you're working in markets that have quite heavy media restrictions, you've got to work with what's in front of you. But in general, as a culture, we are moving a lot more of our spend, effort, strategic focus, and our brand visions into the digital sector.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've got a captive audience here, some of the most senior people in the agency world, in the media owners, technology companies. How would you like to work with people? And actually, if I might cheekily ask, how do you not want to work with people?
Well, I got about 50 emails from meetings last week for people who are here, so that's not. But I think what's interesting for me is some of the stuff that Dominic talked about. E-commerce is a real relevant thing that we are jumping into at the moment. Our customers, so whether they're retailers, are way ahead of us in this game. I would think the industry is probably behind where it needs to be in that area. So we need to accelerate in this world, and that's a big focus for my team. How do we credibly put our brands into this world in a really meaningful way? And the other area which I think is really interesting, that something I'm very passionate about, is it's not that difficult to measure effectiveness of your spend. It's really difficult to measure what that does for your brand. And I think we need to break through this notion of measuring media effectiveness or measuring creative effectiveness, but measuring impact on brand performance. And I know it's difficult, but they're the areas that we have to excel on moving forward. Because if we don't know, if we can't measure our success, then we're in trouble. So we've made big strides on this front, and we're pretty comfortable. But we know that the world is changing. As I said, 10 years becomes 3 years, becomes 6 months. We need to get more progressive in the world of e-commerce. We need to get more progressive in the world of measurement to kind of get ahead of the changes that are coming at us. And working with our focus partners, we're going to do that. And they're the changes, because at the end of the day, we're in it to win. We're not in it to come second. We're not in it to kind of be kind of happy losers. We're in it to win. And our brands are more than capable of doing what we want them to do in the future.
Mm-hmm. I'm interested to know, when you're in it to win, but what does winning look like? The measurement piece is fascinating. I guess what's in and what's out. If your agency comes to you with lots of talk about, I don't know, views or impressions, is that less interesting?
Well, look,
nowadays?
I think this comes back to we're a family business, so the Bacardi business is still owned by the Bacardi family, and they're very passionate family of people who really care about the business. And for those of you who've worked with or in family businesses, you know that they care about the long term. So winning is the long term. Winning is in the next quarter or the next month. It's the long term. So, my responsibility in that equation is to build brands that are built for the long term, that have a long horizon of success in front of them. And we're only going to do that if we truly understand the progress we're making along the journey. So it's not about increasing sales tomorrow. It's about having the confidence that we're doing the right things to drive our brand's growth for the next 20 years. And that's really, that might sound, it may be slightly cliche, but that's the essence of family business management. And that's what we're trying to do. So as we look at that, yes, impressions, but winning for me is creating a portfolio of brands, a unique way of, inevitably, a unique way of marketing for our company that's proprietary to some degree to how we want to look at the business, capitalizing on the opportunities that we saw from Alistair in the Economist report, which I thought was really fascinating this morning, and really, kind of looking back. I'll know in 10 years, right? But looking back at the progress we've made. But fundamentally, we're a brand-driven company. Fundamentally, we will measure our success by the success of our brands. And then, on the journey to that, we'll have to check in on the data points along the way on that.
And I mean, as time goes by, do you think that the way that you'll judge success will evolve as well? As
Absolutely.
as an industry, get better with things like mobile, get better with the new kind of channels coming through.
We're already changing. I mean, it's we, as I said before, we made a kind of a move from a kind of a TV ad first. It wasn't even a traditional media first. It was a TV ad first approach to really putting that on the back and looking at the idea and looking at the broad spectrum of it. That already calls for different ways of measurement. So yes, we're looking at what mediums work best for us, what mediums work best for our brands, and what mediums work best for the messaging, the kind of messaging we want to tell about our brands, and that will take quite a level of detail and measurement. But that has to roll up into a bigger picture. It has to roll up into a so what, because it has to roll up into informing not just the effectiveness of one medium over another, but the choices that we then make when we come around to thinking about it, what we do next. Mm-hmm. And that's where we're doing a lot of work with our media agency to help us get much more progressive in the context of what we're trying to achieve as a company versus what the industry might want to measure it as. And that's a journey we're on at the moment.
Could you give us a hint what that might look like? What is progressive? Top secret?
Yeah. No, I mean, just not it's top secret. I think it goes back to making the jump from measuring the initiative you do to measuring the impact on the business. And that's quite a big jump to make, especially when we're not in an FMCG environment. In many ways, we're a slow-moving consumer good environment, and it's how you make the leap into that.
Depends on the party, I suppose, but
The party as well, yeah, exactly. So these are not issues, but these are the things that we're trying to kind of make sure that we've locked in for the future.
But I'd love to know. Obviously, you have, I think, but correct me if I'm wrong, but really long career in the drinks industry, different holding groups.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to say anything about your personality.
Yeah, cheers. I was wondering about that.
But where do you get your inspiration from in terms of the way that you look at storytelling, the way that you look at brand development?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it comes from your own personal passions. I mean, the work that Steve does is just fantastic. And we had coffee this morning. We actually realized that we worked together 12 years ago on an initiative. So it was great. I think, for me, it's always been about the creativity, my passion for creativity that comes from my own background. It comes from really a kind of a frustration when I see things done badly. But again, it's where you put the center of gravity of your brands and your business. And we've firmly committed to putting our center of gravity onto the creative idea. And that's because that's what we believe will create an enduring relationship with the consumer, no matter where they are in the world. Everyone likes a great idea. But it also comes from seeing where things go wrong. And the alcohol industry has done some of the best work, I think, in the advertising media world. It's also done some pretty horrendous work over the years. And it's kind of learning from that and looking at looking at how businesses and brands have made the changes that have propelled them to success has been really inspirational for me. How we do that, looking at how they've unlocked that moment, whether it's through a manic focus on the creative art, whether it's through a braver focus on media, and you kind of learn as you go from there. And like one of the things that we talk about is that we have to win in culture and win in occasion, because there's no point in alcohol brands being great lifestyle brands if nobody knows that they should be drinking them when they're in certain occasions. And there's also no point in just being relevant in an occasion, because then you mean nothing in the broader sense of things. So as we look to winning in culture and winning in occasion, it keeps our business objectives and our creative sensibilities in tandem, and that's pretty difficult to do. So, one of the ways we've done that is by looking at our own people and looking at our own structures and making sure that the problem isn't us, right? Because sometimes for the client the problem is, well, I'm sure you guys would say all the time the problem is the client, but sometimes the problem is the client, and we get in our own way. And we spend a lot of time with a company working on making sure that we have the right structure to facilitate the kind of brands we want to build, and to make sure that we don't have disruption or noise in the system that gets in the way of doing that. So we've looked at this in a very much a holistic sense. And I think as a company, I'm really pleased with the progress that's been made before I joined. A lot of it's been made before I joined. And since I've started, we've been able to kind of keep moving on that. We're really stoked with the quality of the agency selections we've made. And as I said, that we get these in place, then it frees up more expansive opportunities to think about for the future as well.
Well, I'm going to ask one more question because I'm conscious I want to leave a bit of time for questions at the end. When we come back for our next 10-year celebration in 3 years' time,
6 months.
how do you hope that the portfolio of brands that Bacardi has will have evolved? How will you measure your success? And you've got so many different things happening, like you say, emerging markets. You've got consumer behaviour changing. What are you hoping to achieve?
I think for me, I've got a couple of my own personal kind of objectives on this. The Martini brand is one of my favorite brands in the world. Actually, my first job out of university in the 90s, I won't tell you which year, but in the 90s, was junior assistant brand manager on Martini in Ireland. I think we sold about 10 cases a year of it. But I just thought it was such a cool brand, and actually the chance to come back and look at a brand which is one of the, if not the, but one of the biggest spirit brands in Europe, and a brand that has probably kind of gone off the boil over the last number of years. I want my personal mission is to make the Martini brand successful again. That's a very much a personal thing. But to answer your question directly, As a company, we have our core brands, which are very famous. We have a desire to incubate new brands, to explore new categories. We want to have the portfolio of most credible and desirable brands in the industry. And I think because of our long-term focus, I think because of the fact that we have patience, we're willing to build these brands the right way, we're willing to take the risks in the right areas. We know where the boundaries are, and we are very respectful of those, but we know how to push, and we will keep pushing ourselves, we'll keep pushing our agencies, or we'll keep pushing future partners, we'll keep pushing on our investments to do this. And, because 10 years' time, I'd have to come back and say that we have the most enviable portfolio in the industry. Mm-hmm. And I think we're setting ourselves up to do that in the future. If I look at, the advantages that we have about being independent, I think are important. We want to control our own destiny. And the support of the Bacardi family is just, it's unwavering. It's a real advantage we have. So I've got a huge amount of confidence for the future. I'm very excited about the things we have to do. I'm very excited about the choices we have to make. I'm actually, what I'm most excited about is I haven't a clue what they are yet. That actually is the most exciting part of what we have to do over the next 10 years. But I do think 10 years will be less than 3 years.
Yeah. Well, we've got a few minutes left, and we've got a CMO of major brands who said the door's open to talk partnerships. 50 meetings is it you've arranged, or
no requests?
Still requests. Well, if you haven't got your request through, then this is an opportunity to ask.
And by the way, any requests you've got to talk to Bernardo first, or he'll kill me. So.
Have we got anybody that'd like to ask a question? Anyone? I can't see anything. Well, I've got oh no, there is. We've got one in the far corner there. Mike's on the way. Sorry, just one moment.
Shane, hi. This is Debarshi Pandit, Omnicom Media Group. I think we are supposed to be meeting up very soon.
Oh, there is one of your meetings.
There's one of my meetings.
My question is, how do you gauge the success of a campaign? Because many a times you've got clients who say, okay, fine, you know what, if I run a campaign, I want to see increase in sales, increase in my brand equity or value or whatever. So given the fact that you are a family-run business, where there is a lot of importance on the brand as a factor, how do you gauge whether any campaign that you've run has been successful or not, and what are the parameters for success?
Yeah. So I think one of the best drivers of long-term success is short-term success, right? So we got to make sure that what we're doing is working today, helps us build for the future, and we embrace the kind of conventional metrics of how we measure through testing, qualitative and media. Again, it's to use a kind of, there's an old kind of the old kind of measurement dashboard of, it can't just be working as a piece of content, it can't just be working as a piece of media effectiveness. We have to measure over time. We have to have confidence that we're making the progress to get to driving the business forward. And we know kind of the signpost to get there, whether is the creative any good? Do people engage with it? Is our media plan effective? Are we really taking a risk? We have to have a qualitative overlay and all this stuff, because you can get lost in the data, and the data can reassure you and send you down a blind alleyway. So it's a mixture of measuring the obvious stuff that's in front of us, but really, really qualitatively overlaying, is this getting us to where we want to get to? Is it changing perceptions? Is it driving the qualitative measures that we really believe are going to impact our business? Because again, as a slow-moving consumer good versus a fast-moving consumer good, the average purchase frequency of one of our brands in a country might be twice a year, right? Okay, so you're not going to see the sales shift. That's in some instances, in more instances, more. So you got to have confidence. You got to take a kind of a brave leap on these things. You got to be really, really, really sure of what you're doing coming out the gate. And then, I think someone used the word trust and integrity earlier. We got to believe in the integrity of the people we're working with, and we got to trust ourselves a bit. And that's where I go back to the point we made earlier, that we got to move ourselves up the value chain. It's no longer okay just to be the client at the bottom that pays the bills and takes the results. We got to put ourselves more skin in the game on these things. And we will measure ourselves accordingly against those hard and soft metrics. But a lot of it comes down to belief. And to our own faith that what we're doing on the brand is going to drive the business in the longer term. Some brands we can get more instant response on, and we learn from that, and we learn from what we get on the instant response and how we think that can project to the brands that have maybe a slower trajectory. But it is an area that we are continuously trying to fine tune. You know, as we really clarify our long-term objectives for the brands and for the business, we're getting much more specific about what we think success looks like on the steps to ultimately kind of achieving our vision on the business.
Mm-hmm. We've got 30 seconds if there's one more question out there. Quick one. Anybody? No, I can't see any hands. All right, well, thank you very much, Shane. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.